Looks like we're good. Welcome to Highway Diary. I'm your host. This is Highway Diary, episode 439. Kerry Cassidy is my guest for the last 20 years. She has run an independent news channel called Project Camelot.tv, gathering high level government whistleblower testimonies from around the world. For the third time, I'm proud to announce my guest is Kerry Cassidy. Thanks for doing this.
Oh, no problem. Thank
So
you.
I watched Trump's State of the Union, 17 minutes long. I noticed that the war in Iran was thin on excuses. I like when the government used to lie to me. If we don't get them here, they'll if we don't get them there, they'll get us here. The same lie they use with Iraq. They didn't even fake 9/11 this time to get us into Iran. Trump's avatar said, they're going to try to get a nuke. We got to stop them. At least Israel had the decency to fake October 7th before the genocide of the Palestinian people. I like a good lie. I've been cheated on by 3 girlfriends. I like lies. At least have the decency to lie to me. This round, they didn't even bother to lie to us. But you've been texting me something I've been so fascinated and so ready to talk about, that this whole war in Iran is actually capturing Iran's Stargate. Tell me, what is a Stargate? What does it do? Why does it make sense to go to war for this? Tell me all about the Stargate.
Okay, so just want to say that your sound changed rather drastically, so I don't know if something got detached. Um, anyway, I don't know if you want to pause while you figure that out, but otherwise I'll just start talking. Okay, so the bottom line here is a lot of, they see things isolated as isolated incidents. They don't actually see a trajectory. And I do more so because after 20 years of whistleblower testimony, I can see how things linked up in the past from one thing to another, and that they were building something. On both sides, they are deceiving the public, yes. But the bottom line here is look at the thing that we've got going on right now. We've got ET disclosure, supposedly. Why might you ask, do we have that? Well, because it's time, and the ETs have also decided it's time. So whether they like it or not, they're going to get it. So that's why Trump has to go up in front of the people and say something. He may say very little, actually, but it's interesting how announcing he's going to say something is already affecting the timeline. It's already affecting the way people are seeing the situation. It's, in a sense, it's an announcement without an announcement. So it's, you can't be a little bit pregnant. You're either pregnant or you're not. So we're pregnant. We've got this situation. It's been going on, ongoing to people like me, with military witnesses going back 20 years, and basically saying, yes, they're out there, many different races. We are genetically re engineered over and over again by these various races. That we are a hybrid race, that there are even Matt Gates is saying he was told, for whatever reason, he decided to release this. He was told there were ongoing genetic engineering, they're calling it breeding programs with aliens and humans. What they're really talking about is the alien abduction, the gray human hybrid program that's actually been going on back 60, 70, 80 years. And they've been lying about that nonstop. Suddenly they want to call it an alien human breeding program. And they're suggesting that our military is involved, which they are. But it's actually the Greys that wanted to do it for their own genome. They wanted certain of our DNA because they have ruined their bodies by emphasizing the intellectual over the emotional intelligence, and So the body, the water, if you want to call it water, emotions, has gone by the wayside in their race. So they are less empathetic by nature, which is also a dangerous thing when you come to gray human hybrids, which has been told about in the X-Men movies, specifically in the one having to do with Logan. And that really tells the story right there. And there are other, people who've outed this situation, obviously. We have whistleblowers who are gray human hybrids, admittedly. So that's a big deal. And somehow they have to broach the subject. So a lot of the leaks that we're getting right now are to sort of maybe allow Trump to skirt the actual facts and just address the leaks and or ignore the leaks and just give some pat answer. So we don't know what's going to happen with that. We don't even know if it'll be interfered with or postponed. But this gets into the Stargates in Iraq, believe it or not. Because in through the Stargates, like Saddam was doing, the war with Iraq was the same thing. Nukes are old tech. Okay, this is not what it's about. Whether a country has nukes or not is beside the point. What matters at this point, and did matter in the invasion of Iraq, was that Saddam was opening the Stargate under the museum and letting in Anunnaki and arguably, possibly other races, not quite even so balanced, if you want to call them balanced, maybe even up and up reptilians. Okay. So when you've got a situation like that, our Earth is honeycombed with bases in the sea, in the mountains, underground, in the deserts by alien habitation. Okay, we have been invaded for hundreds of thousands of years, going back at least to, I think they consider it to be 250 years ago, 250,000 years ago, with the Anunnaki who are written about in the Sumerian tablets and the Bible. All right. So this is a problem if you have an invasion going on. And we also have what some might say is, Sharia law, basically, a totalitarian government in charge of this type of thing. And with maybe even nefarious ideas in mind for their own people, let alone for the rest of the world. So if you're the United States and you don't philosophically agree with some of that, then you definitely don't want your enemy having these alien human, even alien humans, but also straight up aliens coming in through a Stargate. Now, I was told years ago by a military witness that the Stargates are moving in the mountains of Iran. They happen to be moving. So they're kind of unique. It's a unique Stargate, portal system. And this is also why we're going to have boots on the ground ultimately to control those Stargates. And that's already happened in Iraq. So I hope this is understandable what I'm talking about, and you're free to ask me
Yeah,
details.
so basically what you're saying is the whole war in Iraq was to control the Stargate. So Saddam Hussein opened up a Stargate, letting in Anunnaki to help advise him how to run the country, but they are bad entities. And so the same thing happened in Iran. They have this Stargate, opened it up, all these horrible reptilian entities that are hell-bent on full spectrum domination of the population have come in. And so Trump is leading the war against the aliens for humanity, pro-humanity, to put a squash on that, on these
Yeah, you are
interdimensional.
sort of making some leaps there. Okay.
I'm
So
trying to understand what you're telling me.
I understand. I'm just saying you're making some leaps
Okay.
because, and I'll explain, because we know that they are incoming races. Our military industrial complex that it has this thing based program, SSP, which is mainly underground and off planet, that has technologies that they actually reverse engineered, yes, from aliens that had already arrived during Roswell and after. And that's why this one scientist has gone missing, and a bunch of linked up other scientists with him, either been shot in the head or whatever, or missing. So we all these things are linked together. None of them are separate. So it's, if you haven't followed this, if you don't know about the secret space program called the SSP for simplicity, then you're going to be completely lost when it comes to the so-called war with Iran. All right. So that's what we're looking at. We're looking at a, a group of people who are known for certain behaviors, oppressing women being one of them definitely, but also from, threatening, disintegration of Israel. Now, Israel is run by the Anunnaki. So if you say you want to destroy Israel, you're basically declaring war on the Anunnaki. Again, this is in the Sumerian tablets between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and so on. So these wars that we think we're fighting on our own, and the humans just thought of these wars, is not correct. We are interfered with by various races. As I say, we are now hybrids going back very many centuries, having been invaded. A lot of this story is even told, carved into the temples in Iraq, Iran, Syria, Lebanon, Egypt. And I lead tours of Egypt every year, whenever possible, when we don't have a crazy war going on like now, or because some people are. We're planning to go April 29th for what it's worth to Egypt, but I don't know if that's going to happen because we're having some people backing out. So, but this is an age-old war that the aliens brought to us, brought to Earth, and that we have been trained, even by the Palladians, if you listen to William Tompkins, a Navy whistleblower, who reported to Navy intelligence, that the Palladians considered us their advanced party. They wanted to train us to be warriors to fight their enemy, which is the reptilians. Okay. So
So
that's
I
also a part of this story.
I got a question. So if Iraq was importing Anunnaki and Israel is run by Anunnaki, wouldn't Iraq and Israel be on the same page if they have the same Anunnaki rulers?
Not necessarily. So again, I'm saying yes, it's very possible because Saddam thought he was Nebuchadnezzar, if you go back in history. He thought he was the reincarnation of Nebuchadnezzar. So that is a certain maybe sect of Anunnaki. Now I don't know everything. Okay, I know the big pieces, and I know what my whistleblowers have told me. Occasionally, I get some extra detail, but as far as that goes, our military, the American military, and our government did not want Saddam to have control of a Stargate where he could let in whatever group he wanted that would outfit them, because these groups that come in have technologies that are beyond even what the United States secret space program may have. And so they can't allow this. For example, CERN is a portal, now Stargate, that they built a whole wormhole going into the Draco constellation to let in these reptilians, the ones with very large ships that would go in the dead of night to war-torn areas, pick up women and children mainly, but also men, and take them off planet, trade them, slave them, make slaves of them, use them sexually, use them for adrenochrome and our glandular substances that they consider to be an aphrodisiac, and so on. Now, there are not, when I say reptilian, I understand this is a bucket term for those that have the reptilian, come from the reptilian species, but there are arguably tons and tons of different actual, I guess you might say, races of species of reptilians. Not all are bad. Same thing with the Draco. Same thing with us. So it's, understand us above, so below. This is the type of thing going on.
So, by your understanding, are Stargates fixed objects? Can they call up aliens from different? Can they tune into different sections? Can the
I'm
Stargate
sure.
physically be relocated, or does it need to be fixed in one place? You said the one in Iran is moving. So
Yeah,
like,
there's
what kind of? Yeah.
a series of gates, and I can actually picture it. I don't know if you can, but what happens is they are probably associated with a portal in general that might be quite a large portal. So the portal is natural. It's a configuration a lot of times where a bunch of ley lines connect and cross, and then they create this vortex, okay, which is in that we call a portal as well. And then it can be augmented and set up as a Stargate, which might have happened millions of years ago with alien tech. I'm not sure how the Stargates got created. That's an amazing, you know, area of investigation. But once they are established, now there's a map of Stargates. There's a map of what are called signet sites that also connect with Stargates in other parts of the world. So there's one significant one in Iran called Abadan. So this would probably be, I'm assuming it's the one in the mountains with the shifting gates. Not sure because again, I have gaps in my knowledge, what I was told and what might not be explained. So, but by and large, like Giza is a Stargate, okay, always has been. People have been talking about for ages that there were adepts being trained in that Stargate, and you can go jump off planet from there. You can think of a Stargate as a gate or a time travel device. Okay, so you can cross universes, etc. If your frequency is the right frequency to get inside that gate. So that's an interesting dilemma that doesn't get talked about much. I know about the frequencies of the gates and so on because of this series of books written, actually translated by Peter Moon, a publisher here in America, written by a journalist in Romania called Radu Cinemar. There's a series of, well, last time I looked, it was 5 books, but I think there are more now. And they're not all translated into English. So the last one that I remember being translated is called The Etheric Crystal, and it contains a great deal of information also about AI and how AI can be positive or negative and all this kind of thing. So highly recommend those books to start to understand. And that is about the Romanian secret space program that we went in, you might even say forcibly or whatever, to make a deal with Romania to actually work with their secret space program there. And that's been ongoing. And that is a very serious alliance, you might say, that maybe a lot of people that don't follow this kind of thing don't know about. So all I'm saying is that that's a fount of knowledge, of good information, aside from what I have already gotten from my whistleblower. So I don't just stop when I get a piece of information. I'm a, investigative journalist, so I investigate further. I look for other places where some of this stuff can be corroborated. I also ask questions during my interviews for the past 20 years with different whistleblowers who don't know each other and probably don't even know each other's testimony back in those days. And so I'm always following these leads or clues, you might say, which is why I'm able to put this picture together maybe a little easier than a lot of my colleagues.
So you're saying it's more like whoever has the tech has the power. So the United States really is focused on who has the highest level tech, and they're willing to
Yes,
use the United States is willing to use their alien tech to suppress the level at which other sovereign countries attain their alien tech in this arms race of gathering. So that's why the Stargates are so important, because that's where countries can level up and then do a lot of destruction if they are
absolutely.
being led by the wrong entities. That's the main point. Yeah.
Well, yes, but it's also very important to understand that we have two major factions at this point on Earth that are at war, and we're part of that war. So this is the earthly level, which has to do with the White Hats on the one hand, led by Trump and John F. Kennedy Jr., who's still alive, and on the other side, the dark entities such as the dark cabal, the Bushes, the dark magicians, and Klaus Schwab and all of this. So the New World Order. So this is the interesting thing about this story is that as they battle, what they're really battling for is control of the earth, which is a new world order on both sides. So each side wants to lead the new world order. That's what they're really fighting about right now. And arguably, not completely, but arguably, the White Hats are winning. Trump and the White Hats are winning. So if you're on the part of freedom of humanity, you definitely want to be on the side of the Trump White Hats. And I understand you're probably not by the way you talk. But the other side is they worship Satan. That's absolutely their deal. Okay. And they are the dark magicians is correct. They come from the P2 Lodge, the reptilian nest under the Vatican. These are all their, you know who they are by their work. King Charles is actually, I believe, dead already, but King Charles is a vampire, and his son William is now the king, and he is also on paper, interestingly enough, the king of Israel. So there's pieces. These are pieces that kind of fit into a puzzle, and if you don't know these different pieces, you don't understand them. Now, I'm not saying there aren't factions, smaller factions that represent this, that, and the other, but these are the two ones that have access to military, which is key. So the secret space program, when Trump got into office and all of that, he could have arguably been put in position by the secret space program, or at least a division of it. If you go back to William Tompkins, again, the Navy whistleblower, he said when NASA was started, there were two types of aliens we were dealing with that were trying to, at times, help us and at times hurt us in our development of our space program. One was the Pleiadians, which are arguably the good guys, but they did have an ulterior motive that they wanted us to be the avant garde in their fight against this certain group of reptilians. And then their enemy, their arch enemy, this group of reptilians who has invaded our Earth. And at the time, perhaps even Draco behind the scenes. The Draco they run the reptilians, but they tend to stay behind the scenes. But that's the two divisions, and that goes all the way down into our secret space program. And so what I'm saying here is that Trump and the White Hats have been helped, and they have the military, they have Space Force, they've made inroads into the secret space program, arguably are backed by them at this point, have some kind of deal going on. And then there's the dark side of the secret space program that to this day is run by the reptilians. And when you see a spaceship, and arguably Artemis is headed to the moon, this is highly dangerous because the reptilians, according to William Tompkins, run the moon, and they could easily destroy Artemis on the way to the moon because they don't want us there, even though we already have bases there. But this is like another push. And apparently, I mean, at least the story is we haven't been to the moon in 25 years or whatever the hell, but that's a lie, okay? Because the secret space program has been battling aliens, if you will. And this evidence comes from Randy Kramer is a Marine who's still a Marine who actually goes on stage and talks about this. He fought in this war. He fought on Mars and the moon. He was involved in both places. So battles are going on both on this Earth and off planet as well.
So I see it as this eternal battle. Even like we talked last time, I was in Rome, and there's like this good Christianity, but then this evil Satanism and paganism. And it's palatable in Rome itself that there's very good people and very bad people. And as I've interviewed Benjamin Fulford many times, and he really insists that both the white hats and the dark hats have their own Trump avatars. So what is Trump exactly when he's got one foot in both pies, and one is a clone and one is a looky likey? And so it's hard to tell if Trump is one entity, because as evidence of that, you signal that he is going to do this disclosure, but the person that is setting up to do write his speech, or co-create this disclosure effort with him, is Dr. Stephen Greer, who you think is a terrible gatekeeper, and he's on the
Actually, they're
side
not
of.
working together. That's a lie.
Okay,
So let's get that
did
corrected.
we talk about this
Stephen
last
Greer
year?
wanted to be
I see.
working with him. He offered to work for him. But my understanding from the White Hats themselves is that's not happening. Okay. So he put out a bunch of advertisements in a certain way, and it was a little bit convoluted where people thought he was already going to work with them. But that was not true because I checked into it.
Okay, so
So the
Greer was
thing
putting
is
out his own PR that this was the case, that he was going to lead Trump's
that he
disclosure
wanted
movement.
to.
I see.
With in fairness to him, saying he wanted to, but it begun to look like he was okay doing it already. So the thing is, though, that to understand the different Trumps. So what we have is now all presidents have doubles, always have, always will. And there's reasons for that to protect their lives, right? Kennedy had doubles even. Okay. And that gets into the Kennedy assassination, whether Kennedy was indeed killed or a double. You have to look at history when you're looking at now, because otherwise you're missing some very important clues. So, one thing having to do with the two Trumps. One Trump, the real Trump, as we call him, is 6'3", and the fake Trump right now, the main double, is 5'8", and he's slightly pudgy. But he is, I'm hearing now. I can't validate this myself, but he is living at Mar-a-Lago. The real Trump is not living at Mar-a-Lago. He's arguably being sequestered for the most part in NORAD, and has been for a good part of this sort of saga that we've been going through, having to do with this, growing war on the ground between these two sides. So you could say maybe there's some pitch hitters in there, because when they have doubles, they often have to have more than one in case the one something happens. There's also arguably that the 5'8", according to Fulford, who, by the way, I flew, and I'm one of the only journalists to do this. I flew to Japan and interviewed him in person way back years ago, and you can watch that interview so that you can understand that I've been on his trail and on this trail for so long at this point that it's going to be hard for you to throw some piece of information out that I have no idea about. But I'll be honest and say if I don't know something. So when we're looking at Benjamin Fulford, he told us while I was on camera with him in Japan, that he had been threatened by the triad and basically brought onto their side under force of death. Okay. So ever since then, he has had to report to the triad. And my understanding of the triad is they actually are both Japanese and Chinese. So they are the leaders of sort of the Asian, whatever, cabal, whatever they call themselves. Triad is the name. So he speaks for them, which means that he is not a free agent. He is actually in a situation where he has to say certain things. And you can notice in every interview, he will do this. He will say something, and you can spot it if you listen closely, that is a triad message. And lately, he's been actually putting out a triad message that he doesn't even try to hide, which is, offering this money to the White Hats, in essence, Trump and the White Hats, for the United States to, in essence, give them tons of money so they don't have to do anything anymore and they don't have to worry, well, whatever, however he couches it. Now, this has obviously been turned down by Trump and the White Hats. And I know some things about this because I have been involved very peripherally because of my whistleblowers who are top financial people who were involved in some negotiations going back years, even. So, for what it's worth, now this situation is just understanding when you're hearing somebody like Fulford that he's not a free agent. It's just like saying, oh, Rick Doty or Gordon Novell, or not Novell, although yes, Novell actually was CIA. A person who is run by the CIA has the same issues. Okay,
Well,
they are beholden to the people who kind of run them.
to play devil's advocate, I mean, we are $40 trillion in debt due to our Federal Reserve System. I mean, getting money from the triads doesn't sound like a terrible idea to eliminate debt,
Actually,
public and
okay,
private.
according to one of my financial whistleblowers, you can take it or leave it. He says that we are not in debt. It's a lie. And Juan O'Salvin himself, in the negotiations via another person, said to me, we don't need their money. We have tons of money. We are not bankrupt. This is a lie. Okay, I'm sorry, but this is what my whistleblowers have told me. Okay, so I understand you think you have knowledge and it's based on the conventional reality out there. But the conventional reality is full of lies and holes. And I can't explain why they're completely opposite stories about whether we have money, how much money we have, all this kind of thing. All I know is I've been involved, I say, peripherally in some negotiations that were going on for years, actually, behind the scenes, where the so-called triad and others even have offered the United States money. Okay. During Biden's regime, for example, there's a specific sum, I forget how much it was, maybe 3 trillion or whatever, in which Biden was offered a certain amount of money, or given a certain amount of money. Actually, wasn't just offered; it was given to him. What he did with it is questionable. Okay, there were things that they were supposed to be going towards. Whether they ever made it there, I have no idea. It's
See,
just that when you presume to take conventional knowledge and propaganda and think you're going to counter my narrative with it, all I can tell you is you can believe it if you want, but my narrative tells the opposite story.
it seems like really bad PR for America to have on our debt.gov that it's 39 trillion or 40 trillion dollars, and yet we have, it's like we're pretending to be this broke poor old man with this high level technology. It's like, walk softly and carry a big stick kind of thing.
So
What's the
I'm
point
assuming
of
you've
the
never read
PR?
Sun Tzu, The Art of War.
I am familiar with this book. I haven't read it cover to cover. So you're
Okay.
saying this is all just a tactic of
Yes,
looking weak when
it
really you're
is.
strong?
Yes.
That's the point
Yes.
of it? Okay,
Yeah,
that's
it's one
very
of the
interesting.
tactics the White Hats use constantly.
So I want to bring this up. So you say that Ben Fulford, he works for the Dragon family. He's open about that. He said when you came to visit him that you were had NSA sponsors. Is this true? Are you completely independent?
No,
Are
we
you
did it on our
beholden?
own dime and we had very little money actually. But he could, you see, they're going to mislead him. I've been told by people that I'm CIA. I met with an agent of the Queen who's been an agent for his whole life. He met with me and he said he was told that I was CIA. But on meeting me, and the man was also very psychic, he said, proven psychic. And he said, he laughed and he said, obviously you're not, because they see what they will do is they'll try to disinfo you to others, discredit you to others. So people are out there discrediting me every day and every night, just like they discredit Trump for that matter, every day and every night. So we, the people, are trying to get the truth, okay, so that we can even figure out on which side we stand, if you want to look at it like that. And even our own side, which in my case would be called, MAGA and all Q and Trump and, as I say, John Jr. and so on, is also not adverse to lying directly to us a lot, okay, in part to mislead the enemy, which is what they say. So it's understandable, again, Sun Tzu, Art of War. War is deception. Other people are saying that right now. That's a little saying inside, Sun Tzu. And indeed, it's true. So again, you have to, this is a war of discernment. You have to figure out who's lying, who's not lying, who's telling half truths, and so on. And lay your bets and take your chances. That's what is happening right here on Earth right now. So you and I don't have to agree. I don't hold it against you that you're telling me all the mainstream stuff. But, I would caution you that the mainstream has already been proven to be completely false and deceiving us on purpose. That much is proven. So you might want to consider this other side who may actually be doing a lot of good in what they say they're doing. So, that's why you've got women demonstrating in New York because they think that it's a bad thing that we're invading a regime that has been arguably torturing and keeping women in, hidden under these horrible things, Sharia law, etc., stoning them, killing them, you name it, for decades, eons, millennia. And they're also torturing their own people in various capacities. And so when you look at these demonstrators, you think they're complete idiots because they think they're feminists. They think they're pro-woman, but in essence, they aren't, okay, because their actions belie their philosophy. So the trouble is a lot of them are deceived. And I understand that. Everyone, I think, understands that. What we call the Democrats is a bucket term. The ones that are so-called woke are following a certain script and they believe that script. They believe that the Trump side created January 6th, for example, when in fact, all of the data that the White Hats have gathered, whether you want to believe it or not, is that on the contrary, it was Nancy Pelosi who made that situation happen. They bust in a lot of fake people that were dressed as Republicans and all this kind of thing. And they actually created that whole scene. And that will be proven in a court of law, I believe, by the White Hats eventually, because they remember, they have a long memory, and they're going to out a lot of these things and arguably have already won a number of significant cases, like the Russia case, for example, where the funny thing is, Hillary was making deals with Russia, and then she accused Trump of doing so. That was laughable. We even knew that back then. Some people just never got a grip of what was happening. Understandably, again, because we are being lied to all the time. And I'm saying, in fairness, by both sides. But again, okay, now let me just say that I have been involved with the White Hats since 2010 or even earlier. Definitely since 2010. So long before they ever became even the White Hats or under that name, and that's just a bucket term again. It relates to what is called the White Hat reports that were being published by a small, very small group of White Hats who had already signed agreements in this group that they formed, which became a secret military organization around the world. So it wasn't just in the United States, it was worldwide. And Paladin was a member, and he's a forensic financial investigator. And for whatever reason, they had a small platform, a website, and it was called the White Hat Reports. And that's where their name came from, at least in the modern day. Now, it's possible because many people say they were operational secretly before the death of Kennedy. And that they might even have substituted a fake, double, a Kennedy double for the JFK assassination. Now, we don't know that for sure, but there are some arguable indicators. There's there's evidence, there's indicators that Jackie, in marrying Aristotle, that he had an island called Scorpio where John F. Kennedy, the real one, was sequestered for, I guess, the rest of his life in theory. And so he wasn't dead. He was not the person who was shot. I mean, there's lots of theories, and Robert Morningstar is one of the people who is, pointed out that Tippit and Kennedy looked alike, and that one could be substituted for the other because they both died on that day. And I'm not going to get into that. It's a huge story, and maybe one day we'll get maybe JFK Jr. will come forward and actually give us that whole story more and more. And that's a huge long story, but I've been following that like white on rice. So I can tell you a lot about that story, the JFK Jr. involvement with Trump. And that JFK Jr. was during the Biden show, which was a 4-year fake Biden played by 5 actors. Biden was executed in January, I believe in January, right before the inauguration. He was never inaugurated. I think it's Derek Johnston or Johnson. Derek Johnson, actually, he's like a scholar, a military scholar, explains very in great detail, if you haven't heard his videos. And he has a website that he backs everything up by paperwork and all that. How Biden was given a funeral. That inauguration was not an inauguration. Okay. And that Biden was never in charge because Biden was dead. He was played by actors, arguably actors that the light side and the dark side were alternately controlling. So this gets really convoluted. But what I'm trying to lay out here is that during those 4 years, John F. Kennedy Jr. was our vice president, and I have that on good authority. So these are things that you don't know, probably, that most of the audience doesn't know and may not have even heard.
Well, our last conversation, we talked in great detail about Mr. Juan O'Savin and his multiple identities and his bodyguard slash
Okay.
other person, so Mr. Wayne Willett. So we discussed this last time, but for sure, Biden, when you see him in during Obama's presidency, and then you see him after, I mean, I always said it wasn't the same guy. And back in those days, I was thinking that maybe he wants to look handsome like President Trudeau. So he had all this face lifts and everything. That was my thing. But it wouldn't surprise me at all that he was just not the same guy at all. I mean, his face completely changed and it looked like a mask. But then, just playing devil's advocate, Ozzy Osbourne's daughter, Kelly Osbourne, has been through so much plastic surgery that if you say, oh, Kelly Osbourne has been killed and she was replaced by a Bulgarian model with anorexia, I'd say, well, that makes sense because Kelly Osbourne from the MTV show The Osbournes looks absolutely 0% like her current form. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. And so Biden's transformation into his presidential run in 2020 looks not as different as Kelly Osbourne when she was 18 to Kelly Osbourne today at 39 or whatever. So that was my always thinking. I mean, people can make radical change. I lived in Los Angeles for many years. I've seen a lot of horrific plastic surgery, you know. So that's kind of what I was thinking. But yeah, I mean, I don't think Biden was the same guy
Well,
during his
arguably,
time.
Jim Carrey's going around in a mask right now,
Yes, I was going to
and
ask you
there may
about
be a
that.
fake Jim Carrey out there as well. I think he's a trickster, so he kind of probably is having a lot of fun with that. Um, we know that lots of people have, been using the masks that Tom Cruise, popularized in one of the whatever that's called, those movies that
Mission
he's always,
Impossible.
yeah. And so, and I did investigation around the mask thing, one of which was Sean David Morton. I don't know if you know who he is, but he was quite a popular producer, comic, investigator like me, so and so, on this trail and so and so. He actually got an out, this, there's a whole bodysuit. It's not just the mask, the head thing, although I think you can just use the head thing. But you wear the whole body thing, which is what 107 does. And it, he said his family didn't recognize him. They didn't know he wasn't him. So for what it's worth, sometimes you can see through it. I've been told that sometimes family can tell the difference, but most of the time it works very well. And there's videos online by the CIA showing you how it's done. So, it's not a mystery. So, this is, yeah, commonplace actually. And I'm sure that Hollywood actors have been using this for years to go out in public and not be mobbed and so on and so forth.
So speaking of this whole body double situation, my sister sent me this whistleblower called Mr. Sasha Riley, and he has this 6-part interview on YouTube. You know, if people want to go check that out, Sasha Riley has been saying that he that Trump was Epstein's boss and that Trump molested Sasha when he was a young boy. And with there being multiple avatars, I wonder if it's, look, if I have a drug dealer, for example, I would want him to test some of the sample before he gives me drugs to make sure that they're clean drugs, in a weird example. And if you have Trump who's trying to clean out the pedophile network, I don't want him getting high on that supply. But it's very murky whether or not he has compromised himself purposely to get into the graces of these upper echelons where they won't let you be president without blackmail. So if he were to intend to have got blackmail on himself and done these horrible things to get to the position, I mean, this is a really, really dark avenue to go. So do you think that the real Trump has blackmail out there to get himself into position to do good? Is that where we're at?
Well,
Or
okay, so I wrote a Substack article about this, actually a few of them, investigating these stories about him being a pedophile and all that. And I've also talked to a top CIA agent who's convinced that he's a pedophile. And I've also talked with, you might know, say, Joaquin Hagopian, who's a famous author who is good friends with Robert David Steele, who supposedly died, a CIA officer, not agent. There's a distinction. But anyway, and so I've gone down this rabbit hole, let's say, and I can tell you that the understanding that I have and that I also put into the article is that one thing you need to know about, first of all, is this thing called deep fakes that is also put into a British movie about 7 to 10 years ago called The Capture, which I actually reported on, watched the series, which was fairly obscure, you know, at the time, which was probably 3 years ago or approximately when I came across it. And it's all about how they can fake you. And this stuff has gotten more and more popular and more known since then. But back in the day when I reported on it on my website, they took down my website for 6 days. So they didn't want this information out there. But the bottom line is you can be faked even right this minute. They can put words in your mouth. They can do all of these things to fake you. Now, that's one aspect that, which is quasi, you might say, I don't know, CGI and all kinds of
Like
technical
on a
stuff.
screen versus in real life.
Yes, although we've already discussed the real
Sure.
masks that people can wear that do look like real life, and they are in real life. And I've talked to CIA agents and others who have used them. So, what's happening here is that in our society, in fact, we have a lot of fakers, people that are faking themselves, they're faking others, they're wearing certain disguises. And so what happens with Trump, in my understanding of this, and doesn't mean I'm right, but this is what I put together after all my investigations, is that the White Hats planned, they have a plan. They talk about the plan all the time, and it was published on Q, the Q drops, and you must know all of that. So what happens is even before they went public with Q, which I think was arguably around 2019, but maybe it was before that. The thing is, again, I was working with them back in 2010. And the thing is that they were also operational before the Kennedy assassination. So at a certain point, one would think, and it's kind of obvious, really, our world was being taken over during and after World War II by Nazis, in essence, who are vampires, a mixture of vampires who want to drink blood, eat you, et cetera, kill humans, kill children, coming from the Khazarian, history, all of this kind of thing. Okay. Satanists, absolutely, self-declared Satanists. So they were taking over the world. It didn't just stop when they never killed Hitler, actually, but when they fake killed Hitler and supposedly won the war, there's great arguments to be made. For they went down to Antarctica, they established a Nazi base called New Berlin, and they continued their machinations and they continued to infiltrate people into our government and NASA, like Werner von Braun, who is a Nazi, and he was an out and out Nazi and never the good guy that Carol Rosin would have you believe. That's what my research has shown. So when you look at that situation, the White Hats and the Secret Space Program, for that matter, who were all developing back in those days, along with fighting Nazism and all that stuff, is that they were actually ahead of the game, that they knew they needed to eventually put forward a presidential candidate who could be trusted in their ranks and also come off as a gangster. And they chose Trump. And there's reason to believe that he was trained by people, by gangsters, basically. Nixon trained him. Well, let's see.
Roy Cohn.
Yeah. So Cohn trained him, and Wexner trained him. I mean, in other words, he was learning at the feet of the monsters, so to speak, for years and years and years before he even ever went public as a presidential candidate. And this is all part of the White Hat plan. That again, what I'm describing here, and I put into my article, and you don't have to agree. Again, I get it. This is hard to believe, but you have to be deaf, dumb, and blind not to see, especially during the Nazi era. And right now I'm watching the Man in the High Castle, where the Nazis could have won, and Japan and the Nazis took over the United States. I mean, ostensibly, we were in a situation where this could have happened. And according to Jim Marrs, who wrote a book called The Fourth Reich, it did happen, but it just didn't happen in a way that people could recognize quite so easily, because Americans are heavily propagandized into thinking we're free when we've never really been free, and arguably have been under the control of the crown for one thing, even especially in our financial situation. So this is where you have to actually go back in history and see what they might have thought of. Hello. Oh, let's have a presidential candidate and let's make him someone who's so famous and popular that he can't be touched, and give him make sure he has tons of money and the whole nine yards. It's as Trump would say, central casting. It's a Hollywood term. I worked in Hollywood for 20 years before I ever got into all of this, by the way. So what happens is, you have to, set up. It's all a setup, and you have lots of leading trails down this path. And so you have to figure that painting him as dark as possible has to be part of the game. Having doubles of him who may, in fact, have been participating in some of these devious, horrible acts. I mean, look, I don't want to know about it, but I can understand that they had to do some of this to paint him with a dark brush, obviously. In fact, if the Illuminati really knew who he really was and that he wasn't that guy, they would have killed him on the spot. So it's understandable, really.
So yeah, I mean, it's just murky if you purposely put in a body double to do a blackmail operation to get ingratiate yourself into the power structure, because the power structure is so rotten from, you say, this Nazi satanic infestation, that they go, okay, he's one of us, he's a creepy weirdo like us, so let's have him
It was
in.
easy because he was brought up at the feet of the Illuminati. And as well is understanding that, again, haven't you ever heard of the DEA? They do this all the time. They put a person, he rises into the ranks and he becomes the head drug lord, and he's a double agent. This is, very common. This is a practice that's been, handled through history, because there's no other way to infiltrate the top ranks except to be seen as one of them. And he had a head start, arguably, through his, entire family line. Same with JFK Jr., by the way. That's why they became friends. You can easily see how they were similar in their background, and that they are the masterminds behind at least the modern rendition of the white hats, and the white, that's what we call, the basically, what we're doing, this war against satanic, child eating, sexual perversion, and adrenochrome highway that permeates our society at this point.
Just anti-war. I've always been anti-war. And so when I saw, I was radicalized in 9/11 when they almost killed my dad, and then they used that as an excuse to go to Afghanistan and Iraq and steal oil. But then a broken clock is right twice a day. So you're saying that, there's always other operations. They're trying to stamp down the Stargate. And even though they killed their own people to fake the war, the reason why they went there was actually an altruistic reason. And I'm just, I like sovereign nations independently being able to defend themselves. And if there's a super state around there that's going around killing people and overthrowing their governments, I always just think of that as just not a good thing.
Okay, but you're willing to paint the Trump administration with the same brush that you're trying to, you can't seem to apply to the other administration.
No, I'm just
Bush
saying.
Sr.,
Hmm.
listen to me.
Hmm.
Bush Sr. was in charge of Hillary the whole time she was in office and Bill, and they were doing his bidding. So a lot of those things that were going on then, regardless of how you view them, were actually acts of a very dark cabal that wants to and still wants to rule the world. So, you're either on their side, you're on the side of the Satanists, and you know it, or you don't. And so I understand where you're coming from, but I know what I know. So, you've had me, I'm here as a guest on your show, and I don't mind that you have that point of view. But I just have to say, at least from my discussion with you thus far, I can see all the gaps in your knowledge that are leading you down a certain road that make you naive in my eyes.
Look, I'm really good friends with Richard Gage of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, and you know that's a big part of my original awakening into all this stuff. So and I'm on his page politically very much so. But if there's but he has we don't talk about the reptilians, we don't talk about Stargates. So that's why I have you on. Um
Okay, fair enough.
so like, I'm humble. I don't go I don't pretend to know anything. So that's why I go to experts and go, what do you know? Please tell me. If I have I don't I'm not like dogmatic, and I'm not like I just know what I know in terms of how we got into Iraq and Afghanistan under by killing our own people. And that's got to be the most horrible thing you could do. So if we don't my whole point is, if we don't at a national level disclose these things, and then before we can't clean our own house before we go into other people's houses and mess with their sovereignty in a
Well, it
military
sounds
aspect.
like you don't know that Bush and the Bush cabal did 9/11.
Oh,
It
I totally
sounds
know
like
that.
you bought a story.
A
Okay,
story.
well,
No,
I don't
Richard.
know why like if you followed the through line since then, you might have known more about the White Hats than you apparently do. But it's okay because I encounter people all the time that know nothing about the White Hats. What part of their deal has been to be secretive, which has been something that I have been arguing against for a very long time. And I write, if you read my Substack articles, I'm not a yes person or yes man. I am a person who is critical. So I'm often critical of some of their actions. But the thing is that I understand their ideals, I understand their hearts, I understand that who they're standing for, and their objective, which is not well publicized because arguably they have one person and one person only who is their spokesperson, which is insane for a group of their size to have, which is 107. And when you have only one spokesperson and most of the world doesn't listen to him, he has a large audience, but nothing like he needs to have to actually get his point across to other people and influence or change minds or whatever. So this is an issue, and they do these things out of choice. This is important to know, by the way, is that both sides are using AI. Both sides have generals that are giving them advice and basically telling them what to do as well. Both sides have psychic intuitives and remote viewers that they rely on. So this is a deep war. And by the way, both sides are dealing with aliens and have alien supporters on the dark side. The dark side has dark side reptilian supporters. Okay. And the light side has other kinds of supporters, including cultures from inner Earth that now have tried to stay away from surface humanity for many, many years and then got involved when the White Hats came to the surface. So, you know, if you're confused, most of humanity is confused. I get it. I'm not always clear on every action they take, but I've learned their MO. I've learned the way they operate. There are those of us in this so-called MAGA movement who have studied them and their actions is for as long as they've been operational and maybe even before, in my case, in some cases.
And I've listened to a lot of 107, so I understand that side. I'm just, if I ask questions, it's to understand and play both sides, like,
Sure.
you know. But I have a maybe a more personal question for you that I've been kind of leading up to, because you have discernment, and there's body doubles, there's different people with different interests, there's people trying to pull people apart. You originally came on the scene with Project Camelot with Mr. Bill Ryan, and then you had a falling out. And without getting too personal, was it were there agent saboteurs that intentionally broke you guys up because you were a power couple? And do you have regrets about this? And what can you tell me about what happened?
No, no problem. And I'm happy to talk about it. What happened was, when we hit the ground, we both had the same objective to get the truth out that hadn't been getting out. And we began by interviewing whistleblowers. I was a journalist trained in college, so I'm an actual journalist. And I had picked up a consumer grade camcorder. One of my first interviews was with Bill Ryan. We hit it off, and that's how we started Camelot together, because we found out we had the same ideals. And both of us were not afraid of being killed. So that was key, because people that do what I have done and what we did back in those days got killed a lot. Journalists are still getting killed. In fact, whistleblowers are getting killed. And that's a huge story right now.
Plasma scientists are
So,
getting killed.
yes. And so the thing is that we both had that philosophy that, look, you kill me now and I'll just come back and do it again. So this is a situation with him. He got, he and I were only romantic for a short period of time. We had a huge breakup. And then we were working together still, but he got various other girlfriends, as people do, um, partners. And one of his girlfriends wanted to get rid of me. She wanted him to be the lead interviewer. And they were doing certain things that I found out about from friends behind the scenes, sabotaging and various things. That's all fine and good. But then what happened, we did have you might call a saboteur, an agent who got involved. And we also had Bill Ryan crossing a line that I don't, that was like, I guess you say a line in the sand or throwing down the gauntlet, because he decided to out a whistleblower. And our premise of our whole platform was that you come to us and tell the truth. We will not out you. We will not reveal who you really are. If you want to be a secret, fake name, whatever it is, we would back you. Okay. That was absolutely, it's in writing, in fact, on our old website. So the thing is that he decided, because that person he thinks lied to him, which he did, this whistleblower lied to him, but he had a reason for lying to him, but that didn't matter. Bill decided he was legally and by
Morally.
conscience and by vindictiveness allowed to go out and out the person's home phone number, where he lived, put his family in danger, and so on and so forth. He actually did that to such a degree that, according to my whistleblowers, Interpol had him on a list and was contemplating, you know, taking him out, taking him, in custody, whatever you want to call it. Right around the time when we had split up already for, I think, about a year at that point, but he actually left. He moved to Ecuador, to the hills of Ecuador. Interesting, to one of the cities, I forget the name of it, where Hitler supposedly hid out. Interesting. But anyway, so that's that really quick sort of summation. So that from then on, I could not work with him because he had violated our main premise, regardless of other nefarious things that were going on behind the scenes with the girlfriend and this and that. So, so that's how we ended up breaking up. I guess that's your question.
That is my
So
question.
we were beginning also to have philosophical differences because in the early days, the people we interviewed and decided to interview, we agreed on everybody. So that went on for about the first year and a half. And then it started to dissemble. And he, was having certain issues with certain people I wanted to interview and so on and so forth. And eventually, you know how it is with people that are partners in anything. You might, battle back and forth and eventually come to an agreement of some kind and so on and so forth. But that was happening behind the scenes of this other thing that was much more diabolical, you might say.
Were there any other how do I say this, opportunities where you were tempted to be compromised because you were so over the target, offered money if you were to be sponsored by certain interest groups, or nobody ever, other than that
No,
agent who broke you guys, facilitated breaking you guys up, you were never tempted to
no.
join an interest group?
Maybe you can't tell, but my whole life I've been the same person I am now. And I've never been, the reason I became a journalist and the reason I was investigating mysteries and I wanted to, and originally my goal was to make Hollywood blockbuster movies like Spielberg, sci-fi blockbusters based on the fact that I was abducted when I was, I think, around the age of 12, and had some memories of that. And so I also was able to see dead people and, the things that kind of growing psychics see. And so I had that going for me, I guess you might say. And then I probably had some help and I definitely had protection because I was in some pretty dangerous situations. In fact, in the early days, Bill and I were both. They tried to kill us a number of times, out and right, outright tried, or at least to scare us to death, like having a wheel cut cleanly off when we went up Grindelwald in Switzerland up to these Alps, and that the wheel fell off right when we got to the top. And had it fallen off while we were on the way up the windy road, would probably I might not even be here because the car would have gone off the cliff, and it's a huge cliff, and so on and so forth. So there were various times, and I was also told they wanted to kill me, they were planning to kill me, and so on and so forth. So I mean, we came in with this mission, and if you read my book that's right behind me, it's called Rebel Gene. I try to explain a little more about who I am, why I'm the way I am, and so on and so forth. And I believe, and you may not like this explanation, but when I first met Bill Ryan and got to know him, we went on a trip to England to see the former home of King Arthur, and that's where, which is in God, I can't believe I'm forgetting the name of this oceanside area where he had a castle, Camelot, supposedly King Arthur, and we I had past life memories of him as King Arthur. And it turned out that other psychics had seen him as King Arthur or one of the Arthurs, because there were more than one. And then this Illuminati expert, diabolical guy who he interviewed, by the way, actually told him that he was from the Arthurian bloodline as well. And I had memories of being Guinevere for what it's worth. And this all sort of, I guess, coalesced when we went to Tintagel, I think is the name of the place. And that's where we actually conceived the idea of naming our Project Camelot, because I was writing screenplays at the time to make a sci-fi movie called, I had one called Project Moondust. And, so Project, I knew that the dark side or the secret space program would use project in front or behind the name of whatever they called the projects. So I thought, let's call it Project Camelot. So then we were going to call it Camelot Project or Project Camelot, and we landed on Project Camelot as being a better name. And we were able to get those URLs. The one URL we never could get was .com. Okay, that's why I had to make when I broke from Bill, I made projectcamelotportal.com, and then we got the .com ending. But up to then we had .org, projectcamelot.org. That was our first website, and it's still up there. And Project Camelot Productions.com and projectcamelot.tv, which came along later. But projectcamelotportal.com was my, you might say, breakaway website.
And then
So
JFK's whole administration was the new Camelot. So it seems like it was your purpose
interesting.
to
Yeah, but
fall
we didn't
into.
know, we weren't looking to copy, Jackie Kennedy or any of that stuff, but that had already been the past anyway. So we were following in the footsteps, just so you know, the philosophy that we both had, which is the round table. The round table being a place where you didn't have a hierarchy, that everyone was equal. That was our premise, and that we were inspired by the King Arthur Round Table.
So even though you're working with, you are not working for the White Hats. You are just uh,
No,
uh
actually, I tried to sign a contract with them and they refused. 107. I asked him directly. He said it's too late. And, he didn't elaborate except to tell me later or around that same time that he would never do another interview. He did an interview with me one time. And he, at the end of the interview, said he'd never do another interview because I would make him break his security oath. And then he told me in person at this festival called the Reckoning Festival in Texas. He actually spoke those words in person, and he refused to let me sign a contract and become a member of the White Hats. But in a sense, it didn't matter and was a good thing because it left me as a free agent, whereas Simon Parks signed a contract with them. And so he's been limited during this time from revealing the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
because part of their tactic is secrecy, but because
Yes,
they're in a war with the dark side, and if they reveal too much of their hand, then they feel like they're being exposed, and they're trying to use some
exactly.
of the same tactics as their enemy to match their
Absolutely.
energy.
100%.
Ugh. Kerry Cassidy, this has been absolutely fascinating. I really appreciate that we're friends now. Can I call you my friend? I think we're friends.
I'm not, it's just the same with people that are religious fundamentalists, which have to face a lot of those MAGA kind of people being. I'm not. I wasn't brought up in the Bible. I don't agree with the Bible. I think Christ would hate the Bible. And I say things like that drive people in the MAGA movement crazy all the time because I don't agree with the principles, some of the principles I like Jesus. I think Jesus is a great avatar, but I don't agree with the Bible.
I wonder what would happen if Jesus walked into the opulence and the grandiosity of St. Peter's Basilica, which I've been in. I think he was more of a sandals by the
He
fire
would
kind of
hate
guy.
the church
Right. Okay.
wisely, in my
Uh,
opinion.
this has been Highway Diary, episode 439 with Kerry Cassidy. Her book is The Rebel Gene. You can catch her on projectcamelot.tv. Thank you so much to my guest, Kerry Cassidy.
Thank you.